Welcome to Automotive Alchemy, a podcast that dwells in the cavernous depths of data, unearthing precious gems of wisdom to illuminate your path to digital marketing success. As alchemists, we understand that each nugget of information is a vital ingredient in our elixir of knowledge. So ready yourselves as we embark on an enlightening journey through the arcane world of data-driven automotive marketing.
Welcome back to Automotive Alchemy. I'm your host, Shaun Rains, and today, special guest, Shaun Kieran, another Shaun, but spells it quite a bit different. How are you doing, Shaun?
I'm doing great. How about you, Shaun?
Oh, man, I can't complain. Everybody can't complain. There's always a million things going on in the world, but yes, excited about this episode. So for everybody watching, or if you're listening, there's multiple different ways for you to consume this information. But either way, today's topic, we're really digging in on Google Ads. And the paid search side of the car business alone has been so huge for so long, but it continually changes. And I'm very, very much anticipating getting into some of the questions that I have for you around kind of what's going on in this part of the business. It's certainly one that I have spent a lot of time in myself. So I'm always interested to see and hear what people are doing and kind of their thoughts on this. And I know that where you guys are coming from at Dealer Alchemist is it's always about instruction, teaching, education, making sure that dealers understand that. You want them to know what you know. Is that right? I mean, you want them to have that level of knowledge that's high.
Well, the more they know about the way these things function, the better they can interact with us about how we can best assist them in the dealership. Because in the end, it has to sell cars, right?
Makes perfect sense. Yep. I love that. I'm a big fan of that. I always have said that I think dealers, one of the biggest things that somebody could have told them back when the internet dam kind of broke and all of these things have come down the path since is make sure that you do that progression of moving from baby food to steak. You got to get to a point where you can eat solid food so that you're not taken advantage of by some of those jackwagon vendors out there. So I want to start today, Shaun, talking about ad types. There are some that have been around for a long time, and then there's some that are relatively new, and then some that are very, very new. And so first question really kind of off the top. And again, for dealers, you're going to get a little bit of everything, things that you may know, and then there's a whole lot of things that will feel advanced, and for some of you guys that are middle of the road. But let's start off with, what are some of the various types? And you don't have to say all of them, but Google Ads, there's a multitude of different ad types that can be chosen, but they're not all ideal or suitable for dealers. What are your thoughts there?
So I would say for dealers, there's 5 main ad types, really. So you've got paid search, which is the normal pay-per-click campaign that we're all used to looking at. We're display campaigns, which, we're highly skeptical of. Let's just throw that out there right now. There's your video campaigns, right? Your YouTube pre-roll that we've been around forever. It's another thing that has maybe seen better days. There's also vehicle listing ads, which if you're not running them right now as a dealer, you should be. And then last, Performance Max. And, the jury's still out on those right there. There's plenty of dealers that tell you how much it works, and plenty of other really accomplished dealers doing great on that space that don't use them at all. So really, those are the 5 main types as far as dealers are concerned.
Okay, good. Let's dig in a little bit of this. So and I want this from your experience.
Okay.
The ad types that you guys see and that you have so much experience. For people that don't know this about you, a boatload, a truckload, if you will, of retail experience long before you started getting into the how do I coach, consult, help, teach, educate dealers. So from your experience, what types of ads are really showing better conversion rates, specifically car dealers? Because a lot of dealers don't think about, well, which ad type might be the one that gets me a better outcome.
Well, and I think there's a principle there, right? It was taught to me a long time ago. So as you know, Shaun, and a lot of other people don't, I spent 20 years in retail before, maybe it might have even been almost 25 years of retail before I came over and started this company. And so one thing that I was taught when I was really young was, does it sell cars? DISC. And in the end, if it doesn't sell cars, it's just for vanity, right? So there are some things that we do as a dealer that are for vanity reasons because we want to see our name. But in reality, most of the time we care about, does it sell cars? So as far as the highest conversion, without a doubt, today it's vehicle listing ads. And so when we talk about vehicle listing ads, let me preface that by saying you can get brand and dealer terms to convert really high, but those are arguably organic business. And so why would I want to spend a bunch of money getting something that's free? Because when you run a lot of brand dealer type campaigns, what you're really doing is you're taking business from the organic campaigns. Whereas vehicle listing ads, which are the picture ads that show on the top when you put in a year, make, model, trim, or color of a vehicle, those picture ads by far have the largest amount of engagement and the largest amount of conversion. And Google is very aware of this. They're making changes to them right now because of how successful they are. So plain and simple, if a dealer's not on vehicle listing ads, they should be. And a $500 budget's not good enough.
I think a lot of dealers, it's interesting the timing of when. So vehicle ads has been something that Google's been, testing and experimenting with for years. But even during the COVID era, they were doing a lot of things with that shopping style ad. And for those of you that are not familiar with maybe what that one looks like, at the top of your page, when you search for any kind of product and you start to see a picture of it and information pricing, Google didn't used to do that with vehicles, but they started doing it and they realized, I don't know why they decided that now's a good time that we can compete, because the third party companies that provide, leads couldn't have been happy about that. But that's the type of ad that Shaun's just talking about here is you literally, if you're not doing vehicle ads, I would wholeheartedly agree. You need to make sure that inventory is front and center. The car is a star all the time. But there's also nuance to all those ad types, right? So with that said, is there a difference when you start to think about all these different types of paid search campaigns? Vehicle ads is now one of them. Maybe what are some of the differences that break down in the types of paid search campaigns? Because some people just think PPC and they lump everything into one category.
Well, and I think that's kind of why I'm excited to do this podcast with you, Shaun, is that when I was shown the initial PPC or paid search campaigns from my vendor back when I was in a dealership, all they wanted to talk to me about was how low my cost per click was. Little did I know that so much of my budget was going to buying my own dealer name at 35 cents a click, and the model terms were there at $8 or $10 a click. And so when we look at the differences, what I would say is that let's talk about the paid search type of differences, because the other ones all kind of stand alone for themselves, although maybe we can sidebar in Performance Max. But in paid search, you've got your brand, right? So the brand, the way that they look at it is going to be the brand of the dealership. So some companies will call it a brand term, some companies will call it a dealership term, and that is really the dealer name. So, we have a Toyota store that's in a city that and that dealer's city name is in the name of the dealership. And so in that case, of course, you're stuck buying some dealer name campaigns or some brand campaigns because your dealer name is the city name. And what do you think everybody else is trying to buy?
Right.
That dealer, right? So if you're the dealer in Los Angeles, because this is a dealer in Southern California, then what happens is everybody wants to buy a Los Angeles Toyota because they think that that's how people search, right? And so generally speaking, if my dealership name does not contain the city that I'm in, so if mine is the dealer principal's last name, Toyota, Chrysler, Dodge, Jeep, Ram, Chevy, Hyundai, whatever, right? So if it's dealer's last name in that store, fantastic. We really don't need to do except but a little tiny bit of that. You probably put a little tiny bit of it in there because Google seems to like your account better when there's some of it in there, but it should be a minuscule amount at best. Your next type is going to be a regional terms. Nissan dealer near me, right? Things like that. And so the challenge in spending a lot of budget on there, and normally when I look in a campaign, I see 50 to 70% of a dealer's budget going to their dealership name or these regional type campaigns.
Yeah.
And companies do it for a couple of reasons. One of the main reasons is that it's very complex and requires good technology to be able to advertise inventory correctly at a low enough cost per click and decent conversion. And so that regional campaign, if you're not doing a lot of that, what happens is that you're picking it up through organic means. And the better the SEO for the dealership, the technical SEO very specifically, some content as well, right? But you got to have technical dialed in first. Content's like the icing on the cake. If that stuff's dialed in and you take that 70% down to, let's call it 25%, well, the dealership sells more cars. Now, you pick that up in organic. So let's say that the dealership does nothing for technical SEO at all. Well, they may see a small drop in service business because 70% of that traffic is service business.
Mm-hmm.
But all that business was going to find you organically anyways, because if you're the closest dealership to the customer and they found you in paid search and looked you up, what do you think they're going to click on? The dealership that's 2 dealerships away or the one that's closest to them?
Yep.
Yeah. So those campaigns, and of course your model campaigns, and the model campaigns being the other thing that's pretty different, right? So you've got your brand, which is the dealership name. Sometimes a company will call it dealership. You've got regional, which is the brand near me, Nissan dealer near me, Toyota dealer near me. And then you've got the actual model campaigns themselves, which are, Toyota Camry XLE, black Toyota Camry XLE, or V6 Toyota Camry, things like that.
Yep. Very model variation. Yeah. So, I mean, you alluded to some of this, is there more to share around the advantages of using dynamic inventory relative to search ads? Because I think sometimes dealers don't understand some of those variables, the nuance to how to make things work. And so you have thoughts on that?
We tried it once and it failed, right?
Yeah.
So dynamic campaigns came out 5 years ago, right? Give or take. Mm-hmm. And the challenge when we started running dynamic campaigns, we didn't know from a technology standpoint how to utilize the sorting functions and the filter functions. So we landed every one of those campaigns on a VDP. Well, let me tell you, that doesn't work. So if I'm a dealer and 4 years ago, I tried a bunch of dynamic advertising to a VDP, what I learned was it didn't perform very well and I didn't sell a lot of cars. But let's go in today's world. And I'll just tell you, nothing says success like a success story. So one of my favorite success stories is Dan Cummins. You may have heard of them because they sell a couple of cars here and there, right? July, they sold 1,680 vehicles across the 4 rooftops. And so when we started with them was November. Every single month since November has been a record month for the company, culminating in July, which was the single largest sales month in company history. Well, what do we spend the majority of their budget on? Dynamic inventory. So why does it work when it's done correct? And that's really the answer. So
there must be a difference then between maybe a standard way or the way that is the status quo versus the way that you guys are doing a setup. Care to share any on that matter?
Yeah, I'll be more than happy to, because I think it matters. And so when you think about the customer search journey, right? The customer that clicks on a paid search ad, they put in Toyota Camry, whatever sort of modifiers to it, trim level, color, equipment, whatever it might be, or maybe it's just a standard search. Well, when they put that in there, if they land on a VDP, the challenge is that car is probably the wrong color, probably the wrong trim level, probably the wrong price, probably the wrong something. And that's why they bounce. But instead, our technology, for example, it filters that search results page and it lands them with only the inventory that qualifies. So they click on that Camry ad, they land on a Camry search results page on the website with the Camrys that apply. Or let's say it's a used Kia. They land on the used Kia Sportage on that website at the Toyota store, and any Kia Sportages they have would be there. And now the consumer can filter and sort easy in order to look at other vehicles instead of just going to the homepage. And as we all know, when they go back to the homepage, that's where they go to die, right? That's where the customers fall apart because that's where all the lag is. And so dynamic inventory done correctly, the company's software has to be able to understand how to filter the search results page and land only that inventory on that page. And when you do it that way, you see higher engagement, you see better conversion, you see a lower cost per click, right? Like I would say across all platforms, when I look at model search, we average less than $3 a click for all of that model search inventory. And I look at accounts all day long from competitors that are $5, $6, $7, $8, $10. And I mean, and I'm talking about big markets too, right? It's easy to get a low cost per click when you're the only dealer in a small city. But let's say you're in Houston or Fort Lauderdale or Los Angeles, for example. We had a month where the Camry terms were $1.98 in Los Angeles for a Toyota Camry. Because when you do things right, you can make that happen if you give Google what Google wants. it's all about what Google wants in the end.
Yeah, that's a tremendously low CPC in Los Angeles for really any
We're pretty
brand.
excited about it.
Yeah, my goodness. You just chiseled out a whole bunch of reasons why the differences between, I guess, a status quo type of setup versus what you guys are doing for your dealers, why it matters. I mean, sometimes I think dealers don't understand that the consequences of some decisions, or maybe just not knowing that there's a better way to do something, aren't that significant. And then some of them are tremendously significant, right? Like gaping holes of where you're wasting lots of money. But sometimes, and you know this because you spent more years in retail than I did by far. But do you also think sometimes that the dealers, they need more people like yourself, your team, to also help them again with that educational piece, so they won't just recognize, well, okay, so you tried and lost, and maybe that investment was $25,000. Okay, great. Wouldn't be the first $25,000 that the dealership tried and lost with, but why did you lose, and can you prevent it? Because it doesn't always mean that what you tried shouldn't ever be tried again. It might mean that you've got the wrong provider, or that provider, it tried only one method, or they don't have the capabilities to do more than just the ABC version. Do you think that's a underutilized part for dealers of just getting that education, so they kind of know that it wasn't us? Maybe it's not even the vendor. Sometimes it is. A lot of times it's the vendor. But is there more than one way to do this? Do you think that's
here's a way to look at it, right? So think back to the car business. So I started in the car business in the mid 90s. And so when I started learning about advertising, everything we did was offer, headline, deadline, right? That was how you built ads, period. And it was incredible for a long time. In today's world, I mean, I wish that worked because it's fun to write those ads. But that's not how people look today. People today are looking for a year, a make, a model, a color, a trim level at the price that is reasonable. But they're looking for the vehicle first. The vehicle is the star. And what did we learn a long time ago? The car is the star, right? Yep. Well, let's say that I tried something when it was first coming out through which other company touted, I've got this AI quote unquote search whatever. You know what? Every company tried it and a lot of them failed. Just because they failed in the beginning doesn't mean that it didn't get better. Because I'll tell you what we learned. We learned that technology should build the ads. Technology shouldn't make decisions. Because technology recommends decisions that don't make sense. Because it only understands lowest cost per click. But let me ask you a question. For example, if I was paying $2.75 for the Nissan dealer near me click, which I know is going to be 70% service, and my service department that has all the bays full every single day and a waiting list for 5 days to get into service, or I pay $3 for a click on a 2023 Nissan Rogue Black SV, which one of those clicks is worth more money? To me, as the dealer, it's probably the second, especially if you've got a way of making sure that those are only sales clicks. Because when we build that budget, what are we really trying to do? We're trying to build the sales budget. When we build the service pay-per-click budget, it looks completely different, right? So I think in today's world, technology's evolved. And the challenge is that if I've got a legacy agency with legacy people, I didn't have to evolve technology to compete because I had a team of people that we could compete with. But in our world, we believe in transparency, results, and utilizing technology for a better result. I mean, there's AI, for example. So if they can get things like if ChatGPT can answer a question and write an essay for you and pass the bar exam, I sure hope that we can build technology that can build out an AdWords correctly, right?
Yes.
And so in the increase in utilization of technology, what it's enabled a small company like us to do is it's forced us to be in the lead position for innovation because, frankly, we didn't have a choice. We don't have the same cost structure. We don't have the same infrastructure. So we have to learn how to be more effective. And it just so happens that when you build out technology effectively and you interface with Google the right way, you drive a better result. Like Dan Cummins stat is unbelievable. And I just talked to Tony Clarakis, who's the marketing director for the group. And I mean, he's got plans to get to 2,000 cars. And this is Kentucky. They sell 24% of all of their brand's vehicles in all of Kentucky. It's ridiculous.
I love that there are dealers that are hungry like that. I only recently, actually last month, drove through Kellogg, Idaho. And it's such a small town. Not everyone, but you and I know this Dave Smith Motors, the juggernaut of Chrysler, Jeep, Dodge, Ram, just for years and years, just obliterating. And I think every billboard in the town was Dave Smith Motors.
That's right.
For so many years, you would hear the stories of what they decided to do. And then it was one of those moments for me where like, gosh, man, it's got to be 15 years at least that I've been, Dave Smith Motors. And I drive through the town and see the billboards, and I'm like, "This is where they are? No way!" It was a bit of a surreal moment.
The first time you see it, isn't it?
It really is, and it's also it's kind of encouraging, a little bit heartwarming that you don't. The internet, when it came about, it opened the door. It flung them open, and I know the OEMs like to do little things where there's like, "We're going to do some things with your market, and you can, and you can't." But there's still enough that if you want to just put it all out there, I love that. So it's cool that they have those big goals and that you guys are helping them get there. You mentioned something a couple minutes ago, and man, this is one of those topics, Shaun, where you and I could probably do like an epic like Joe Rogan 3 or 4 hours on this, but I'll try not to let it be that. But I love the fact that you actually pointed out, and I think for the dealers, I don't want this to be a buried lead in this conversation before I move on to talk a little bit about transparency. For the dealers really on this podcast listening, you need to really think about where you are from a service perspective, whether that's, hey, we are loaded up and we're so busy. It makes so much sense, actually. And it's one of the things that I loved about vehicle ads. You don't have a whole bunch of people coming into your service department through those ad types, right? And so it was great that Google finally went to ad types like that, but you need to be talking to somebody like Dealer Alchemist because they know those nuances and those intricacies, and that will help you at the dealer level realize, oh my goodness, it's absolutely worth another quarter for this lead that doesn't need service when we're going great in service. And some dealers, it may not be that you're going great in service, but you're not able to get enough technicians in yet, and you can't solve that problem just yet. You still need to be pushing metal across the curb. There are so many things like that strategically to be aware of, and choosing the right partners that will help you first be educated so you're making great decisions. It certainly will make you feel a lot better if you have somebody on board like Dealer Alchemist, because they want you to know what's going on first. It sets up such a better conversation with your service provider when you know little things like that. And you dropped a couple of those nuggets, and I just want to make sure I mentioned them. Transparency. Let's talk a little bit about that. It is extremely crucial, but not everyone always. I mean, I feel like it's kind of one of those words where we just, yeah, of course, transparency. But I'm one of those people, I think just like you, I don't like to gloss over it. It's crucial for car dealers when it comes to Google ad campaigns, but why? Why would you say? There are some that I think are obvious, but not all.
Yeah, so I think the best way to sum this up is I was taught early in the car business that if you can't see it and verify it, it's not true. And the other thing that I was taught in the car business is that if they're hiding it for a reason. And so the challenge is that there's this thing called Google Analytics. And if I look at Google Analytics, for example, and I do not have my AdWords connected to it, then the vendor can steal money from me over and above the agreed upon ad spend percentage, and I have no idea of noting. So I have seen multiple examples in the last week where I pulled open campaigns, and you could tell from the invoice and the billing, the dealer, you look at their analytics campaign. They've got 2,000 clicks in their analytics campaign. They spent $10,000 on search. That's a $5 cost per click, just in case you didn't want to do the math. And we found that all of a sudden they had $2,500 of display advertising inside of there, which, by the way, is pennies per click. And they had $1,500 of dealership name in there. Well, I got to tell you, that math doesn't add up, right? Because that means that either they were completely foolish and spending $15, $20 cost per click for those actual model campaigns, Or maybe there was no transparency, and maybe what they said they were getting billed on was not the actual truth. And I'll tell you, there's two sides to this. I'm going to tell you up front, as a company, I am not going to give anyone access to our AdWords campaign. Our dealers don't have access to it. It is 100% our proprietary technology and build in the back end of that. And there are a couple of companies that are like us out there that are very, very protective of the back end of their AdWords campaign and will not give you access. And that's okay. Because in reality, when you give someone access back there, you're giving other companies carte blanche to be able to look in there and try to copy it. And if I'm a small company like us, I mean, I've got 150 clients, right? And so which is great because, we had 100 before Jeff Clark got here, right? But that being said, right? So for us, we want to protect that build and to protect the way that works.
Yeah.
However, there is zero liability and zero loss of anything if I connect that AdWords campaign 100% to analytics. And so in doing so, what I ensure is that the dealer can verify that invoice is correct. Because what should a company do, right? Mm-hmm. Let's talk about the best practice. The best practice is we start Google advertising on the first of the month because we had an accurate budget. We divided that budget into an average daily spend broken across the different model lines. If you really want to get specific, our technology allows it to automatically adjust budget based upon available inventory that comes in transit into the dealership, which, by the way, is a very unique feature where I've got like Toyota stores, for example, with 0 cars in stock, or General Motors dealerships with 0 cars in stock. And we've still got live model campaigns running based upon percentage of available inventory, but that's a whole other sidebar. Well, from there, what should happen is that budget should get spent over the course of the month. And then at the end of the month, that spend looks like $10,313.12 because it's not exact. So if you got a bill for $10,000 in the beginning of the month and you think your advertising was fine and you go to do a reconciliation, you may be upset at the end of that reconciliation. We once caught a vendor that we fired from a dealership and it was $14,000. And do you think the vendor was going to tell anybody? No, they're just borrowing that money for a little while, sir. That's all. We're just borrowing it. We're just holding on to it for you, right? It's like a savings account that you don't even know exists, right? Mm-hmm. So transparency is crucial because in digital advertising, you can hide money.
Oh, yeah.
Well, and we're a flat fee vendor. So make no mistake, for us, it's very simple. It's in my best interest to get that message out there because I don't take a percentage of ad spend. And so for me, when they pay $1,000 flat, when they pay $999 for paid search, guess how much profit we made on $999? Whatever my expenses were minus the $999. That's how it happened. But when you get paid a percentage, first, it's in their best interest to hit the dealer up for more ad spend. That's why they always want more ad spend. But second, you can hide money all over the place, right? Yep. So transparency is crucial so that you know that when you spent $40,000 that month, that you got $40,000 worth of performance. And you can hide $2,000 inside of that with ease, right? There's a well-known company that's all over the place right now that you pay $4 or $5 a click for that's getting that click for 25 or 30 cents.
I mean, some things never change.
That's right. Although that's our goal, right? Our goal is to bring transparency and results to automotive. The dealers should know exactly where they stand all the time, for better or for worse.
Yeah. Well, I'm personally a big fan of that. And, just listening to you share some of these actual real life in the trenches stories, it brings back a lot of memories. It's not that far back, for me, running some pretty big businesses, doing a lot of paid media, especially paid search, and know the Google game really well that, I fell in love with just being really open and transparent very, very early on, because I just felt like not doing that, you just kind of set yourself up. As soon as one dealer wants to decide that I'm going to move on from just eating, baby food to I eat solids, and they get it, you're just exposed. And it just felt like, but some people still like to play that game, sounds like, and I think it's a dangerous one. I was going to kind of ask you a little bit about, how dealers get that visibility that they want. And you mentioned a couple of things that I think are really important, and I'll just reiterate: connecting your analytics and ad Google Ads accounts is the place where you're going to get that visibility. And even when that happens, dealers need to be encouraged. And so this is the Shaun and Shean telling you a little public service announcement. Not only should you connect those things, but if it's not you, someone at your dealership needs to have the knowledge. And if they don't have it, I'm guessing, Shaun, that you guys would be more than happy to just help somebody, like just coach them up a little bit on what to be looking for and how to be vigilant and protecting your investment. It's not always set it and forget it. It's always usually better when the dealership has learned enough that they get to be a much more participant or participating more so in that relationship. And so don't just connect these two. Don't just connect analytics and Google Ads. Know what to be looking for. Yeah, absolutely. So I guess that's kind of one of the things that I would ask next is there are a lot of dealers that are not camped out in analytics all the time, 24/7 and reading everything that comes through LinkedIn or whatever. Yeah.
Right? I mean, selling cars is harder today than it's been in a long time, right? The challenge that we have now is that we have an entire staff of people that forgot how to sell cars. And, it was shooting fish in a barrel. It was dynamite in a pond. Well, the problem is that it's not anymore. And if it's not anymore, well, all of a sudden we have to build value. We have to make a friend, right? Meet, greet, qualify, meet, greet, build rapport, qualify. And they don't know how to build rapport and they don't know how to qualify. Well, you're in a whole lot of trouble. Well, most of the stores that I know, they're busy managing that. And that is so much to manage. They can't spend all day in analytics. So I would say, as a matter of fact, if there was one takeaway from today above all others that was the most important thing, it would be this is the process you should follow to make sure you're being accountable, right? And not stolen from. Yeah. Number one, every single dealer should have AdWords connected to analytics. There is zero reason why it shouldn't be. And in that connection, you should see every single dollar spent in that account, period. Number two, every dealer should reconcile those spends with the advertising statement. We took on a dealer in New York, right? So we're in, we have a large growing presence up there, and we took over for the store that's now they're the largest Kia dealer in that region now, right? So when we took over for that store, we found an invoice, and it was the most ambiguous thing I'd ever seen. It was paid search $19,000, paid social $5,000. Such and such, $4,000. Some program I'd never heard of, $3,000. You get to this $35,000 invoice. My guess is they were making 30% profit on the whole thing, right? And so we didn't increase budget. We just kept the spend the same and reallocated things. And they went from, they sold 30% more cars now, right? So how do you do that? Well, you reconcile the invoice to the penny. What is my Google spend that's on my invoice that I got sent from my vendor? What's inside of analytics? And there's a person in the dealership. It should be the internet director, the marketing director, right? And if it's not one of the two of them, because we don't have them, it's a general sales manager, a general manager, right? Those are one of those four people is accountable for that ad spend. And so if we do that, what happens is that we verify and validate. All we did was confirm that they spent what they said they were going to spend. That's step number one. And I would say that's the minimum. Now, I would go so far as saying I would love to teach someone how to take it a step further. But again, those two are the most important. But let's just say we took it a step further. What would that look like for someone that's has some analytics experience? I would say you should go inspect your campaigns and your ad groups. Because when you go to inspect those campaigns, you find things. Like, for example, when I found that this well-known vendor had a display account buried in their new Toyota Camry account, for example. Why did they do that? Well, they wanted to make the cost per click look really low on Toyota Camry. And once you pulled that display campaign out of that Toyota Camry, it was a $10 click. Not so good there. Or I found another one where the dealership name campaigns, the brand campaigns, were buried inside of your Ram truck campaign. I found another one where I looked up F-150, and as I go to look at the F-150, there were $15 to $17 a click, and we go to look inside of there, we find, how come this display campaign is sitting inside of here at a lower amount, right? So these things happen. And so it's like a misappropriation, like miscategorization, I guess, is the right way to say that. of where those accounts should go. And a good vendor is never going to do that. A good vendor is going to have transparency, and they're going to show you because they care. They're actually proud of it, right? A vendor that does that job correctly, they can't wait to show you that it's that way. They can't wait to show you how, and they can't show you why. Like, I'll tell you, on my team, we love peeling open an AdWords account with a dealer and showing them it's a $2.40 Ram campaign or Silverado campaign, because I know everybody else is twice that, right? I know it's a feather in our cap. And it takes a lot of technology properly built to make that happen. So sorry to go off on a tangent there, but I just think it is so, so important. You're talking about thousands of dollars a month being stolen.
Yeah.
Or maybe they're not, but wouldn't you want to know?
You would want to know. And I don't, I think it's great that you share all of that. And, just that is still going on. Literally, I had another flashback. Former employer, you and I knew each other at that time as well. It's probably when we first met. They will go unnamed. But from that era, I remember we did a video about it, but we were doing a paid search audit, paid media audit, really, for a Chrysler Jeep Dodge store. They didn't have the Ram franchise. They were just Chrysler Jeep Dodge. And so as we start going through with the dealer,
I think I know where this is headed.
Audit, they thought they had a gotcha on us because they weren't really like, they were trying, and they were like, we don't sell Rams. And I was like, well, you should probably go tell your existing paid search provider that, because you have been buying Ram terms for about 2.5 years to the tune of, and it was thousands of dollars. Oh. And they thought they had a gotcha on us. Like, we don't sell Rams, as if we're a bunch of idiots. And we were like, well, that may be true, but we're not running it. We're trying to help you, like, get your business by teaching you this. Yeah, their previous vendor, I won't name names, we'll be nice on this episode. 2.5 years, Ram terms. It was thousands of dollars for on campaigns for trucks they don't sell. Or
maybe tens of thousands of dollars. Right?
It probably was, yeah. So on transparency, I did want to ask this. There are a lot of people that use third-party reporting platforms. Do those platforms typically have the necessary or that needed level of transparency if they're going in that direction?
So I think that's a really important point, right? So us as a company, as an example, we spent the last year building out a third-party reporting platform because we, like any other company out there, realizes that Google Analytics is difficult to look through, and finding better information that's available on one screen is a better and easier way to go. Mm-hmm. And so the challenge is that anytime you put something in a third-party reporting platform, it serves one purpose: an easier way to view the data. The challenge is you can manipulate what goes into a third-party reporting platform. How many times have you seen a PDF or a PowerPoint presentation of ad results that come over to the dealership? And when you're looking over there, you see that there's 3 different items on every one of those PowerPoint presentations. Well, I tell you, unfortunately, what I've found is when you inspect a lot of those things and you go back and look at the ads account, you find that they've omitted certain pieces of information. Maybe it was by accident. Probably it wasn't. And so in a third-party reporting platform, it has a purpose, and it's to make it easier to look at. You want to spot check that. Like, that's where we should live throughout the month, because frankly, you can look at more data easier in a third-party platform. But at the end of the month, what do we have to do? We have to go reconcile, right? If my CFO goes through and reconciles to the penny, I've got a general ledger with every single account and every single invoice. And what do you think she's done? She's made sure that every one of those balances to the penny. And if anything was out of rounds, the first thing she did was fire a question up and said, hey, this doesn't match. What's the explanation? Mm-hmm. And as a dealer at a place where, right, I mean, it's the easy way to hide money. One of the things that I used to do inside of the dealership was find fraud, right? And what you learn is that it's easy to hide it all over the place. And so third-party platforms are wonderful. They make your job easier. They absolutely have relevance, but it doesn't negate the need to validate your AdWords spend. And again, AdWords to analytics, put that total right there to the penny, compare it to the invoice. When it matches, congratulations. High five your vendor and tell them how much you love them, because they're doing a great job. there's nothing wrong with validating and verifying that someone's telling you the truth. I think attorneys say trust but verify. Isn't that the phrase, I think?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. More people need to do that for sure. How about before I move on, because I want to get onto another segment, but before I get to that one more last one on transparency. Are there common areas, pitfalls, areas where the transparency side of things is kind of lacking? And if so, maybe some remedies or how they might be addressed by the dealer?
So the most common areas where transparency is lacking, or we just and instead of how about where we lack visibility, right? I think the term is being visible. We should have visibility into everything to know. We want to be able to verify. Well, the problem is that it is a significant practice in the automotive space to have a campaign, which is the parent group of an advertising asset, and underneath that you've got an ad group. Underneath that is the actual ads themselves. Well, if I've got a campaign that doesn't perform well, and your biggest three culprits are going to be F-150, right? That one's a huge one. Dodge Ram, that's another one. Chevy Silverado, like GMC Sierra is another one, right? They're the four most common places where we find this, right? If your brand has the one vehicle term that's more expensive than every other one, this is where they're going to hide it. You'll find other parts of advertising, other forms hidden in that part, because by hiding it in there, they drive down the average cost per click, right? So when your vendor tells you you're at a $2 cost per click and you know you've got display running, you probably should start asking some questions. And I'll tell you, there are some display campaigns that work, but it is the very severe minority of campaigns that work. Most of the time, it's a poorly set up piece of junk. And how do you know? Well, you look in analytics and it's on site for 2 seconds. I'm sorry, but have you ever been on site for something in 2 seconds and made a reasonable buying decision? Well, if you couldn't, the consumer probably couldn't either. So just the other place where you lack transparency, once you kind of get into the basics, which is I'm going to validate and verify my AdWords spend with my actual invoice, then the next step is to dive into those campaigns and just make sure their ad groups and the ads match. Because if I go to a Ram campaign and then I see the dealer name in this city is the best Ram truck dealer in the world, that's not the Ram truck ad, right? As a matter of fact, there is a right way to do it. Google has a responsive side of advertising. Responsive meaning that it will adjust the ad content based upon the consumer search query. And when you build ads correctly, Google advertising is attached to Google. Well, what do you think Google has more than anybody? Data. Chances are they know what you're looking at. They know what your hobbies, your interests, all those things are. Well, a properly written ad understands how to leverage that back-end data of Google with the actual ad contents. And when you build out all ads to be responsive, which means that it's not just this payment on this vehicle or this discount on this vehicle, this sale price on this vehicle, because those things are not the proper way of doing it, right? They work. They're an okay method, but better is my ad content changes according to the consumer. It's going to match both their search query and the back end of their profile. And when that happens, everything performs better. So look for weird ads hiding inside of a campaign that don't make any sense. That's the moral of that story. And a very long-winded answer for it, I guess.
No, I think, but it's important. I mean, a lot of these things on the surface, paid search as a topic, Google Ads. We weren't even talking about paid search through Bing or anywhere else where you can do paid on a search listing. Google is the juggernaut in terms of digital ad platforms, right? And it's an unbelievable. We have never seen anything like it in the history of mankind in terms of an advertising platform with all its targeting capabilities and ad types and all that. So I like to hear you explain some of those things, because I like to think of it as if I'm a dealer and I'm listening to this and, okay, what should I be looking for? It's great insight to the approach that you guys are taking from the Dealer Alchemist perspective. But even without that, just listening to you share content like that, that's
Can I ask you a question, Shaun? Just here's what I feel like, right? And there's a lot that I don't know. As a matter of fact, there's more that I don't know than do know. You know, right? So I joke with my wife all the time, like, I know how to run a car dealership. That I can do with my eyes closed. It's the only language that I speak. But God help us if I've got to get milk from the grocery store because some kid is going to starve, right? Because I'm not good at all that stuff. Well, what I feel like in the car side, right, is that when you have a partner in advertising, they should be helping you understand what their capabilities are so that you have ideas. Mm-hmm. Because us as a company, for example, a lot of things that we do are because a client said it would be great if you could do this. Right? Mm-hmm. Like we built out our ad platform in the beginning and we automated all of it because we thought that's what made sense. We thought it would be cool because that's what everybody else was doing. And then what we realized was this dealer had a special purchase of this many caravans. And we thought, we better be able to act on that specific set of caravans. Or in the middle of the month, without them even knowing, all of a sudden the Nissan dealership gave them an allocation of Altimas that they weren't prepared for. Right? Like these things happen all the time. And so a partner should be able to say, this is how our campaigns work and our platform works. So just this morning, I was looking at a Nissan dealer down in Texas. And what they said is, hey, these 5 models are my focuses for this month. These 4 models, I actually don't need any ads on because we are so well put together in those vehicles that I don't really have any left to sell. But these 5 models, I need help on. And so what do? We modify the advertising for those 5 models because if you have technology, you can do it really easily. And yes, they're going to have a huge close to the month, right? So partnership means that the dealer, that the vendor says, this is what I can do. And then the dealer is able to say, well, here's the challenge that I have. Here's what I need your help solving. By the way, this is coming on. I want to work on this. How are you going to help me get there? And that collaboration is where the best results come from, I guess.
Yeah, no, that's a great example. I mean, a dealer that knows that you're not just capable, but nimble, right? Hey, it's the middle of the month or middle towards end, and I just need a week or 10 days of let's go strong and hard, but I only want you to touch these 5. When a dealer knows that, I mean, that very much feels like a partner. I'm getting on the phone with DA saying, hey, this is what's going on, and I think you guys can help. And then you guys, of course we can. Let's get on it. That's huge. That's the difference between somebody that you think of as a supplier that's just the light switch. You turn it on, you just expect the light to be on, but there's really not any interaction. That's why there's a lot of laziness in terms of reporting. And you mentioned a couple examples of people cutting out things out of PDFs and sticking them into a PowerPoint and calling that a report. And there's a lot of nefarious jackwagon behavior and all this because it can get easily brushed under the carpet, or it doesn't ever register with dealers, usually because they just don't know enough. I want to move into another topic that's always been big with paid search. And I've always felt like people, from the time I really started getting into it heavily, that why does everyone index so heavily on CPC or cost per click? For people who are, there's probably not a lot of people watching or listening that don't know that CPC stands for cost per click. And really that was the foundation of paid search ads, right? You were paying per click. When someone clicks on the ad, that it costs you $1, it costs you $5 or $10. But can you explain a little bit more on the metric, the CPC metric, and why it's so prominently used in these types of ad campaigns? Well,
so when you're a vendor, you learn to speak dealer, right? And what you learn is you learn what the hot button for the dealer is. So how do I give the dealer enough information so that they'll allow us to stay employed for another month and stay off our back, right? So, I mean, maybe it's not really like that, but I promise you there's more of that going on than you think there is, right? Mm-hmm. Well, the challenge is that it's real easy to give the dealer a dumbed down set of core metrics with the expectation that that's good enough. And a long time ago, when cost per click wasn't, when the whole set of Google ads wasn't as complex, that would suffice. But in today's world where you can hide that display campaign, or you can build it out differently in order to drive a different result, or you can have the brand name for the dealership, right? So if I buy my dealer name and my dealer name costs 35 cents, my CPC is 35 cents, and my model campaign is $10, maybe I want to try to stick those two together and make that look better, right? So truly, a combined CPC is an old metric. And we give it to a dealer because that's what they expect to see, because as vendors, we taught them to see that way. But instead, in today's world, we've got to break that out per campaign. And I think it's really important to know and understand what is the cost per click on every individual campaign. because it changes based upon market conditions. So let me give you a perfect example. 1 month in California, every Toyota dealership that competed with us in the Los Angeles market happened to be asleep at the wheel, and we were under $2 cost per click for model campaigns on Toyota Camry, which, by the way, will probably never happen again, right? Like, we got lucky one time and we took advantage of it. We took advantage of the situation because that's what you do. Same thing if I'm in my dealership, I want my unfair share of the market. You're like, give me all of it. I want your business too, right? And if you're slacking, I'm happy to take it. Well, if I look at that same campaign and the next month it goes up to $3.50, we should be able to look at why. We can look at market insights. The vendor should be nimble enough in the campaign to be able to go say, hey, let me look at market insights. Let me tell you why. It turns out that your competing dealer over there went from a 10% market share to a 30% market share like that. Whatever happened in Camry, you must have pissed them off because they're spending a bunch of money, right? Mm-hmm. And so there's always a data explanation. And it's hard because, right, selling cars is part art, part science, right? Mm-hmm. The selling part, there's a whole lot of that. There's a whole lot of making sure that we have the art of communication, the art of the sale, right? Mm-hmm. There's also the science and what are the metrics that drives the opportunity to the dealership so that the art can happen. Well, advertising is part art, part science, but I got to tell you, the art was offer, headline, deadline. The science is let's do a data analysis on the store. Let's understand the cost per click metric on every one of those. And as the vendor, let me tell you, Mr. Dealer, on what's changing in your area when I look at your account so that you don't have to go figure it out. Mm-hmm. I should be able to tell you that the cost per click on this model campaign went up, and it went up because your competitor's buying, they're spending a fortune in that area. Doesn't mean that you have to, right? I've got stores in certain markets where they've got a competitor that's going to lose money for 3 or 4 months a year, and they're going to spend all the money in the world. They're going to take every loss in the world. And then the owner is going to get mad because he's going to get tired of the black eye in the financial statement at the end of the month. And then that's going to change, right? But if you know, you can act. And so cost per click, it's great. You need to know it. But a one-size-fits-all cost per click metric means we're hiding things. Mm-hmm. Now, instead, my display cost per click is here. My brand campaign cost per click is here. My model campaign for my truck is here. My model campaign for my car is here. And that's what the vendor should go over with the internet director, the marketing director, whomever that may be, or the GSM, the GM, or the general manager, depending on the size of the store, right? Like that's the interaction that should be real.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, it's another thing that happens within CPC that some dealers are like, oh yeah, it makes sense, is that the auto industry is seasonal, right? I mean, from, going back to school and all that kind of thing. Fortunately, the kids are still going back to school. Hopefully it stays that way. Right. I will not divert us into a different topic, I promise.
Yeah, because then we'll all be pissed off for a little while. So please don't do that.
Yeah, right. But not only is that a seasonal thing that happens, large holidays, and I know that you guys see this, especially in the winter holidays, even before you hit Thanksgiving, but just before Thanksgiving all the way through Hanukkah, Christmas, New Year's, it's not just automotive, but it's at every level. All 3 tiers spend heavy, December to remember, all that kind of stuff. And it does have an effect on dealers that are trying to, at tier 3, to compete at the same time. And you have to be working with somebody that knows that's going on, so that some campaigns you're just like, we're just not doing this in December. It's like, it is a waste of money, but we are going to do something. It's going to be this, where what you're describing right now for a dealer that's trying to decode the alchemy, it's your capabilities will allow you to be so nimble that you can architect a plan that is smart no matter what's going on in the market. And instead of just indexing on, cost per click, because the dealer who doesn't know as much will think, I want to hold you accountable to the cost per click from April in December. It's like, here are the reasons why those things change. And if I'm a dealer, I love it if somebody tells me, none of these factors exist in April. They all exist in November, December. See what's going on here? And they're like, oh, I totally. It opens that knowledge. They say knowledge is power. It's like, but it's kind of worthless if you don't do anything with it. So I love the fact that that's a big thrust for you guys, is like, we want you guys to be smart like us. It makes a better relationship between dealer and, service provider. So that's awesome. Also on CPC, and you touched on this, so I'm going to not make you go too deep on this. There's probably a little bit better way to inspect, and you talked a little bit about that in terms of relying on cost per click solely. So if you had a dealer who was like, hey, well, that's the most important thing to me, what would you tell that dealer? Like, well, there's a little bit better way to inspect that.
Yeah, I'd say, is that the most important thing, or is the most important thing the net on the financial statement? Is the most important thing maximizing your PMA and being 400% sales efficient, right? Which sounds made up, but I got a dealer in New York that's 400% sales efficient. Figure that one out, right? Well, if I look at an account, I would say there's a couple things to be aware of. The first is CPC solely as a metric. Well, if I'm looking at a $2 cost per click and they were on my site for 1 or 2 or 3 or 5 seconds, did they really look at anything? Or was that either a misclick or just some bot that was on there, right? So you have to pay attention to how long the person was on the site. And one of the great things about GA4 is that in GA4, you see they term engagement on GA4. It's a metric that they track. It's not just time on site, it's actual engagement time. Well, if my engagement time is 2 seconds, I'm sorry, but the ad didn't work. So take that cost per click times the number of ads, right? Think about that as a dollar amount in your hand right now. Now grab that lighter and light that money on fire, because that's just what you did. Instead, what is the real cost per click, right? I was talking to an unnamed marketing director the other day, and they said, I am excited about this 3-minute time on site that I have for my AdWords campaign. And I said, I appreciate it, but I love you. If I ever have a 3-minute time on site for my AdWords campaign, you should fire me on the spot. Like, please know that I'm not doing my job. It means that I am doing a disservice to you as a vendor, because Google has stated clearly for years that they want to land you on the right spot in the first click, right? That is they couldn't be any more clear about that's their entire goal. In the first click on the product or piece of information that you're looking for. That is the goal of paid search, is to make that happen. Mm-hmm. So along those lines, you're looking at 2 things. You're looking at what is your cost per click and tracking it. And it is the vendor's job to review this with the dealer and show them what this is on a campaign level, and then combining that with time on site. And it's funny because when I see all those PDF and PowerPoint results, you know what they don't have on them? Time on site. Well, why do you think they don't want to show you that your average time on site for the $2,500 display campaign was 3 seconds? Why do you think they don't want to show you that? Well, because they want to keep the profit. That's why. Right. So I would say the best way to know is, if you really wanted to inspect, look at time on site. If I'm looking at like and it's changed in Universal Analytics and in Google Analytics 4, right? So in GA4, if I'm 30-ish seconds engaged time on site on a display ad, on our social ad, they're doing a good job. Like 30 seconds of engaged time. And if you don't believe me, open your browser right now, open up your piece of inventory, look at that vehicle that you want to buy, find the sexiest one on your lot, and then count to 30. And you're going to see just how long 30 seconds really is, right? On paid search, that metric is going to be between 1 minute and 2 minutes, with the average being around 1.5 minutes. Because in a well-built paid search account, they're going to land on the search results page for that vehicle. They're going to browse that piece of inventory. They're either going to look at it there because you can find enough information to decide if you want to convert from a well-built SRP, or what you'll do is you'll go into the VDP and spend a little bit of time there. So I like 1.5 minutes time on site plus a reasonable cost per click. And I would say that the general rule of thumb is, let's say that you're averaging about a $3 cost per click on specific model inventory. That's someone doing a good job. when it's combined with reasonable engagement and actual leads.
I like that. I got one more on this topic because I'm thinking maybe if you have something great, if not, that's cool. But anything kind of anecdotal experience-wise, a case study where this very thing where a dealer was just way overemphasizing, way over-indexing CPC, and maybe it caused some challenges for them.
So it's funny, we have a number of those that we've built now where we started with a dealer. They had a preconceived notion about how they were taught to look at this before. They started with us because either they believed us when we went through the sales pitch. I'd like to think that I'm that good of a salesperson, but we all know I'm not, right? Most likely they were referred to a vendor or a friend of ours, like a dealer partner of ours said, hey, you should actually try these guys. Like ignore Shaun being a geek. Like that guy might talk too much, but what they do actually works, right? Well, What happens when we build those case studies is what we've found is that the number of clicks from the CPC campaign tends to go up because we've eliminated these really expensive cost per click parts that didn't matter. The number of phone calls goes up because what happens when you move away all of that, we call it the stolen organic business. And, and for that metric, a lot of times that Performance Max campaign is stolen organic business, which is that's about another 1 hour podcast, by the way. Right. So, but for the most part, let's just say that I've got all this regional terms and I take them out. Well, all of a sudden my Google business traffic goes up. That phone call is easier to click. They click on it the second they're on the Google business profile and they hire, engage in service. So the person that clicks on that Google business profile is a better engaged service customer that's more likely to schedule. And my campaign goes to actual vehicle campaigns and it drives up the number of phone calls and it drives up the number of leads. And when we talk about leads, I'm talking about real website leads, which means my website, confirm availability, get e-price, unlock your best price, blah, 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 my digital retailing tool, my trade tool, my credit app, right? Like all of those things combined. And when you do the right job, those things go up, right? So that's what those case studies show. We joke about them now in presentations that they don't even look real. When you tell someone that a store had their best month in company history in July of this year with 7% interest rates, they don't always think they're telling you the truth until they go call the dealer and say, this can't be true, is it? Right? So anyways, that's what those case studies show. And it also shows when you pull the focus away from just cost per click and instead show it into let me show you how and why we do this for advertising, it allows the dealer to see trends. And I'll tell you, the one thing a dealer can see above all others is if you give a dealer enough exposure to information, they're going to identify a trend. And they might see it before you do. They're incredibly good at it, right? Like, that's one of the things that makes a dealer is the ability to identify a trend that no one else sees, right?
Yeah, I love that. I'm gonna take you through more of a rapid, just so I won't keep you forever again. But I want to touch one more area, and you will probably think, well, why did you leave campaign setup questions for the back half of the episode? Because normally you talk about, well, how are you going to set all this stuff up in the first place before it starts rolling? And I also think for those tuning into the episode, definitely pay attention here on some of the setup stuff. And you don't have to give us exactly don't give away the farm or anything, but touch on a few of these things I think will be really helpful. And the place I want to start is there are always foundational elements that the dealer needs to make sure are in place when they set up a campaign. We talked about ad types. It doesn't matter the ad type. You could elaborate if you wanted to, but share a few of those things from your perspective and what you guys do. These elements that they have to be in place or the dealer's just really going to be unhappy.
Well, so I'm going to begin by telling you that it's best that this is at the end of the episode so a lot of people don't hear this, right? Because someone's going to get pissed off, right? we made the decision as a company to not be a Google Premier partner. We are not. And frankly, at this rate, we probably never will be. We chose not to be a Google Premier partner because they require a certain amount of display advertising, for example. And the problem is most dealers don't have excess budget. If you had excess budget and your search account was properly built out and your vehicle listing ads account was properly built out and your social advertising account was properly built out and they were saturated and you had a little bit of money running in OTT, then you know what? You would run some display. Mm-hmm. Now, I'm going to tell you, there are very few companies that are really good at it. And I mean very few, right? And it's all about time on site and cost per click. So what elements should you have in place? I would say what you should not have in place is a display account. And 99 times out of 100 in our world, in the automotive industry, that money is better allocated into the paid search account, into the social account, or into the vehicle listing ads account. And they're probably underspending in vehicle listing ads and paid search, right? So what should we have? If you have your dealer name, you should have a little tiny amount of it running, but it should be a little tiny dollar amount, and that's it. I can't tell you why, but I can tell you the data proves that when you have a little tiny bit of your budget, and I mean like 1% of your budget dedicated to the dealer name, even when you're in the middle of nowhere and you're the only Chevy dealer in 100 miles, for some reason your ad accounts perform better. I don't know why it is, but the data is very clear. Second thing is your regional terms, right? So dealers, my brand near me. So we haven't talked about Hyundai and Kia, right? So Hyundai and Kia dealership near me, right? And I should probably have been talking about Kia because we have a lot of Kia stores as some of our bigger clients, right? But those regional terms, and I would say that those should be the smaller part of your budget. The next thing is all of your actual models. Most companies build you only their top 2 or 3 model campaigns. So let's say that I'm a Kia dealer. And let's say that they build me out the Telluride and the Sorento and the Sportage. Well, we have this little problem on the side called electric vehicles. And so when you're not running an ad on those electric vehicles, and instead they're landing on a model research page from the manufacturer, how many of them actually become leads? I'm going to say that's 0. Just throwing that out there, right?
Yeah.
Well, let's say that I'm with any brand that has more than, 3 or 4 models, and you sell a ton of cars by having inventory ads built on all of those other models. So you should have one running on every model, period. And you should demand it. It's not up for discussion. It's an actual requirement of the account. So those things built out. Now, from there, yes, you got to manage the cost per click, but we're looking at foundational elements. My vehicle listing ads account is my next account. I said it in the very beginning of this podcast. If you don't have a vehicle ads account running, you are making a mistake. And I'm just going to throw this out there. I see budgets where 50% of their money is vehicle listing ads because that vendor doesn't know how to run proper model paid search. That amount is too high. But I will tell you, for anyone that's listening to this spot, 20 to 30% of your budget of your in comparison to your paid search going to vehicle listing ads feels like the sweet spot today. But Shaun, at the end of this podcast, you know what changes? Commercial. I guess I need to be watching one. I've been talking for too long. Vehicle listing ads become a part of Performance Max ads in the beginning of September. And you know how Google changes things. We don't know what happens until it happens. And That's so right. At that point, I can promise you it's going to change. And so the proper vendor is going to experiment with lower and higher to find the right mix. And I would tell you, it looks like every 3 to 6 months, the right mix tends to change. At minimum, it's twice a year, right? So proper elements are my dealer name at a very, very tiny, small dollar amount. Probably in there 20, 25% of my budget that goes to these regional sort of terms. My Kia dealer near me, Hyundai dealer near me, Honda dealer near me, so on and so forth. And then after that is going to be all of my models that I have in my inventory. Unless, of course, it's like, I have no Tellurides in stock. Well, obviously don't sell the Telluride. Every Telluride I have is on pre-order or pre-sold. Okay, don't advertise the Telluride. That would be silly, right? You don't need help getting orders on that vehicle. It just orders itself at this point. But there's a lot of brands with electric vehicles right now. And I got to tell you, I see a ton of electric vehicles that are not advertised. Do you know why they're showing up and landing on dealers' lots? It's because we don't spend any budget on them. And the dealer will tell you, well, I hate the vehicle, so I'm not spending money on it. Okay, so you want to drive up your floor plan. That sounds like a great idea. Let's just drive up the floor plan cost, because that always works, right? So those are the components. I would say those are the fundamentals. YouTube pre-roll, it's just not as effective as it used to be. Google will figure out how to monetize it again, and when they do, no problem, we'll do it again. Display, same thing. It's very hard to do correctly, and you have to monitor time on site, and you have to understand that it's at least 50% bot traffic on average. So anyways, long-winded answer.
Bot traffic. Yeah, no, it's great. Also want to ask you on campaign, while I got you on this part, dealers, I've done presentations on this in the past, aligning the objectives that the dealer has with what they're doing with Google Ads is it's usually a miss.
That's right.
How would you recommend dealers kind of effectively audit and look at what they're doing from a Google Ads perspective based on alignment with their objectives?
And of course, sorry for a little piano in the back. My kid is playing piano in the background.
It's all good.
So I think the most important thing is at the start of every month, every dealer knows what their main focus models are for the month. And you should absolutely go over it with your vendor, right? It doesn't mean that they take everything away from those other campaigns, but that's where they put the focus on. It's real easy in a lot of domestic stores where it's a big truck world, right? However, there's a lot of times where I've been in the Ford world where we didn't have F-150s in stock, and it was really Explorer and Escape, right? And so know what those vehicles are in advance and communicate them with the vendor, and then the vendor should show you what they're doing different. Oh yeah, I'm going to focus on those. That doesn't mean anything. That's yes, man. That's like, yes, sir, I'm going to do whatever you tell me, sir, and that's passively aggressively doing nothing. They should say, this is what I did to make a difference and make that adjustment work.
Fair enough. I like that. Common mistakes that you see that you've observed when people are doing setups? I know I've seen some atrocious setups in my day, but I'm guessing it's still going on.
You know, I would say my biggest ones, my biggest pet peeves are, we have found, and the data shows us, that when you set up your ad accounts and you hard code the ad to the least payment or to the lowest price, you are effectively going to blow up that vehicle, because you're not advertising the lowest price Nissan Rogue that exists. You're advertising the least expensive one that you have in your inventory management system right now, which could be $8,000 more than the other one. And let's just say your consumer is looking for the $34,000 one because that's their budget, and your ad shows $38,000. Congratulations, they're not going to convert. Let's also say that you've got a lease payment. Lease for $537 a month, because you look at the purchase payment at 7.5% and you say, I'm not showing that to anybody. Well, that customer says, I'm a $400 payment person. Congratulations. You just took them off of your vehicle completely. Right? What we know about a consumer, and I mean, bear in mind, I mean, 20 years, right? And I wasn't great. I was a 20 to 25 car month salesperson. So I can't tell you how to sell 30 because I never did. Right? Mm-hmm. And so those people sell 30, 40, 50 cars a month. They can do things that are magical that I don't know how to do. But I can tell you what I remember about selling cars, and especially teaching people to sell cars, is you meet, you build rapport, you get to know people, you understand what their needs are, you understand what the pain is and what they're currently driving. As you're learning about that consumer and they begin to fall in love, the falling in love with the vehicle changes what their expectation is. And of course, a smart salesperson doesn't go land them on the fully loaded, King Ranch edition, because then you're going to lose a customer when you come to start that pencil, right?
Right.
You land them on the least expensive vehicle that fits their needs, and that way, the pencil's going to work out. Well, same thing. We don't know who's going to lease and who's going to purchase. So don't put that in there because you don't know. You've got a digital retailing on your website. Allow them to get engaged with the vehicle first, because until they get engaged with the vehicle, they haven't taken any step towards commitment. And all you're actually doing is giving the customer a reason not to do business with you. Right? So I would say those are my two favorite pet peeves. They're my biggest by far. Third one is pay attention to what the separation in ad spend is between those campaigns. If it's 50% vehicle listing ads, that's probably a little bit too heavy, right? Pay attention to if they're advertising new and used. That's another thing that matters, right? I see dealers all the time where they're advertising only new and no used, right? Maybe we should advertise some used in there and get that used car volume up a little bit. Mm-hmm. I'm just saying, maybe it makes sense.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I like that. I've got two things that I want to ask you before I wrap this up with you, at least on this episode. Last one, we didn't talk really at all about keywords and their relation to all of this, keywords are big on the organic side of the search conversation, and they're also very, very big on the paid search side. And I'll let you go as long as you want on this, but keywords can be a really, really big topic for a lot of reasons. And, because obviously negatives and there's just so many variables. And one, as you think about how you're going to, you probably have a great answer already formulating in your mind. But I remember having challenges with, for example, Honda. And I remember working with dealers that were also power sports, and they sell Honda motorcycles, and Honda motorcycle dealers and the Honda, relationship with the auto side. It would be really easy to find dealers that were just obliterating everything around Honda, just overspending like crazy. But they also would crowd it out so that if you were selling Honda motorcycles, it was like, what? Or you'd find people running really lazy automotive keyword management in automotive, and they would have Honda car dealers showing up for things like a Goldwing, which is not a Honda car, it's a Honda motorcycle, or a Honda Africa Twin, which is a Honda motorcycle. So I don't know if any of that plays into this question, but I'm just curious to know, your thoughts on kind of the role of the keywords in campaigns for these types of setups.
So I would say there's an old way and a new way of looking at that, right? So the old way is I've got my main set of keywords, and it may be 200, 500, 1,000 keywords that are sort of the main things that I'm trying to buy inside of my account. And then I've got 10,000 negative keywords for all the things I'm trying not to show for. Well, you know how that negative keyword list was created. It's because over time, over hundreds of accounts and thousands of accounts over many years, they found somebody clicked on it and they added it to the negative keyword list that they automatically import when they go to build out that dealership. Well, the smaller your keyword list is, the larger and more important your negative keyword list is. Well, today we have this cool thing called technology, right? That's a dumb joke, right? And so with technology, we have the ability to build out every possible keyword on every single vehicle in inventory the second that it comes onto our website. And so what we found the best practice is if you build out every possible keyword variation on every single vehicle in inventory, plus the comprehensive set of brand type terms, you don't require as big of a negative keyword list, because it turns out Google actually knows what you sell when you give them all of the keywords which are telling Google what you sell. Imagine that, right? And so when I look at a negative keyword list, we probably average 10,000 keywords upon launch at a dealer. And I've got accounts with 75,000 keywords inside of them, because we built out every single variation of every single vehicle in inventory. And magically and mysteriously, there's a side effect to that. The side effect to that is you don't get a Honda Goldwing click at a Honda store, because a Honda motorcycle dealership is different. Like, for example, we do all of the advertising for the #1 Triumph dealer in the United States, because it turns out motorcycle power sports technology it works the exact same there. And what we learned from that was that when the technology is rolled out correctly, it negates a really large negative keyword list. I'll never forget, we launched with this dealer in Arizona. I'm not going to mention his name, but if he's listening, he knows who he is, and I love you for it, because he remembers the conversation. Because he calls us 24 hours after the program launches, and he says, "You all suck. I'm pulling the plug. This is complete BS," right? And I say, "I love you. You got to give me a chance. I promise that it's different, And I know you've been ran through the ringer. And this guy has been controlling search for his group for a long time. And his job is to find the fraud. So you can imagine what his table appetite is like, right? Because he's found a lot of it. And he has a military background. So, this guy's an old sailor. So you can imagine how that goes.
Yep.
So 1 week later, he gets on the phone. He says, I'll be damned. I cannot believe it. You were actually right. I thought that I needed all these negative keywords in there. And I love the fact that we don't need them because you built your keyword strategy out there. So I will tell you, you should know what it is and you should identify with the dealer or with the vendor. And with that vendor, today's best practice is every vehicle in inventory, every single keyword variation, 10,000 plus keywords, right? So if it's so big on a spreadsheet, you can barely send a CSV file. That's how you know it's the right list. Right? Yeah. And you can only do that with technology. So that's the best way to say that.
I love that. And so this is a good place for us to kind of land the episode. All of these actual real world stories, I think, are contextually so important because everything that you guys are doing, and even now that you've kind of instituted your podcast, it's still about educating dealers, right? And so the last thing that I'm going to ask you that you can just give a yes or no to this, because I want to use it as an invitation to your audience, and that is, would you be willing to walk an interested dealer through a step-by-step process, or maybe it's a checklist of some sort that they, or maybe they've got a marketing team, should follow when they're wanting to do campaign or ad inspection setup? Would you guys be willing to do something like that?
All the time, for free, anytime. Right? Like, I think that the way you set up an account is everything.
Okay, well then there's no more perfect place, I think, to land the episode. I can say with confidence, Dealer Alchemist is clearly wired to educate and delight dealers with results that they've never seen before. You're already doing that with the dealers that you're growing your company with. Until next time, I'll tell the audience, hey, if your dealership needs knowledge or truth or better digital marketing results or all of the above, then go over to dealeralchemist.com and let's talk about how science sells. And better yet, take up Shaun Kieran on his offer to walk you through as a compliment. Just take him up on the offer to go through that step-by-step process, because not only in this episode, to add on a conversation like that, just to make sure that you know what you don't know is worth more than you probably even realize. So thanks for joining us on this. Yeah, go ahead.
You got to close out. I'll tell you one quick story, and then you can close out that last line, even though we're so far over and this thing is way longer than it was supposed to be, right?
No worries.
I'll never forget, this dealer calls and they go through this inspection process. And as I'm going through, and their agency was this little tiny company that I had never heard of before. And so I start looking at it, and as I go through all the setups, I'll never forget, we go to set the meeting. And we go through the meeting, and what I tell them is, I love everything about the way that this is set up. I love the search setup. I love the social setup. I love the transparency. I love the way that you're being billed. Quite frankly, I'm actually really confused about why you're calling us, because it looks to me like everything is bulletproof right here. And what they said to me, they said, well, he pissed me off because he told me that I was at the maximum amount of spending that I could get from my market without starting to lose efficiency. And I said, well, it sounds to me like that's the partner that you're looking for, right? So the worst thing somebody could have happen is they could validate that what they're doing is spectacular. And when that happens, congratulations. Wouldn't you rather know?
Great point. Great point. Well, then I will say this. Head on over to dealeralchemist.com, get engaged, reach out, and never stop learning. And guess what? Your future will be much, much more settled than staying in the dark. So until the next episode, we really appreciate everybody tuning in, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Thank you.